First up, I would like to introduce to this August gathering Mr. Rajiv Chelladurai, author and life coach with over 2 decades of training corporates in leading businesses like the Tatas, the Birlas, Max New York, BPL, etc. He is also the founder of Ergo's Mind and is actively involved in the employee wellness program. He is going to be taking us through the psychology of a world-class leader. Ladies and gentlemen, please put your hands together and welcome onto the stage Mr. Rajiv Chelladurai, the first speaker for today's conference.
Awesome. I know it's a Sunday morning, and it's awesome that you guys are here. And I really think that great things are going to happen today. The topic that I'm going to be speaking on is called the psychology of a world-class leader. The psychology of a world-class leader. I think the slides are going to come up, but even as it comes, I'm going to get started. You know, there's this quote from one of my favorite leadership gurus. And he says this. He says, everything rises and falls on leadership. Everything rises and falls on leadership. And this quote was by John C. Maxwell. And I think he got it spot on. He got it really right. Because when you study organizations, when you study teams, and when you study businesses, and consider all the changes that have happened over time, you find that what stood and made these organizations stand is leadership practices. And if you look at what makes the difference between a great organization and a good organization, and for that matter a great team or a good team, is really not so much the product or the processes, not so much the policies, but ultimately it's leadership practices. It's leadership practices which causes organizations to be great. And by great, they are consistent in terms of delivery. By great, they are excellent when it comes to delivery. By great, they have kind of lasted the test of time. So the question then is, what is leadership? And I know we all have our answer to that question. Several books have been written. There are formulas, if you may, in terms of what leadership is about. There are definitions. But allow me to share with you what I think makes a great leader from experience that I have gone through, and also from looking at it from the perspective of psychology as well. I think there are 4 tenets, or there are 4 pillars. I think the first pillar that I would like to talk about of what makes a great leader is the pillar of inspiration. Leaders need to inspire. It's a very important component in the armory of a leader. I mean, you look at any great movement that's happened. Take, for instance, the independence movement that we have. I mean, I was not born, but what we know about of our wonderful country, it was driven by the inspiration of one great leader, Mahatma Gandhi. You see, when you inspire, when a leader inspires, he is directing the energy of his team members towards a grander vision, to a large cause, and to a large objective. I'm sure you can. We look at different styles of leadership, and one style is by directive, right? You've got to be directive and tell them, hey, you have to do this, you better do this. I think there's a place for being directive, but that's only strategic, only for a temporary aspect. But for the large scheme of things, for the strategic things, for the big things and the big movements, and to build institutions that last, leaders need to inspire. You see, when you inspire, you are creating ownership amongst your team members. They begin to own the task, they begin to own the goal, they begin to own the challenge, they begin to own the opportunity. And that ownership is critical for the effective execution of whatever it may be. So the first tenet, like I told you, is inspiration. The second tenet, as far as I'm concerned, is this important pillar which is called as influence. A leader needs to influence. And what is influence? Influence is the ability to lead without a designation. And very often we kind of mix up. We think that leadership means designation. And the implications of that is the higher I go up in terms of my designation, it means that I will have greater control. Maybe true to some extent, maybe true at the surface level, but it's not entirely true. The test of leadership is the ability to lead without a designation. That is the test. How do you influence? How do you communicate? How do you get people to believe in the cause, to believe in the objective? That comes by influence. And therefore, as far as I'm concerned, I think some of the greatest leaders are leaders without designation. And often we think that leadership, well, it operates only in the context of a corporate setting, or it operates in the context of a team sport. But I want to tell you, some of the greatest leaders are leaders at home, who are the homemakers and the mothers, not having a designation, but doing the greatest work that is possible. I look at teachers without designation, and I think they are creating generations which will change nations and nations of the world. Influence. Inspiration, influence. The third aspect, which I believe is an important tenet and a pillar for leadership, is the ability called initiative. Leaders need to display initiative. Leaders need to take the initiative. Leaders need to be the catalyst for great action. As a leader, if you just give the grand vision and you sit back and you allow everybody to take the lead, well, you're not going to be successful. A great leader is somebody who folds up their sleeves and dirties their hands. A great leader is not somebody who says, hey, you know what, I've organized a Dundee march, now all of you go march. A great leader leads and takes initiative by leading that initiative. You see, when you don't take the initiative and demonstrate the initiative, things just kind of float around. But when a leader displays initiative, the team actually follows. And might I add, along with the initiative, the keenness to complete the task is also important. Inspiration, influence, initiative. Three great tenets of being a good and important leader, an effective leader. Now, what happens when you put these principles together? What's the impact of this on a team when you put this together? Well, the impact on the team, in my mind, are threefold. When teams operate in an ambience or an atmosphere of a leader who inspires, who influences, who takes the initiative, is a creation of what I call psychological safety. What is psychological safety? Well, when a team has a culture and an ambience or an atmosphere of psychological safety, team members feel vulnerable. Now, what is vulnerable? Vulnerable is just being themselves, just being their authentic selves. They don't need to pretend to be somebody else because they want to impress the leader or they want to create an impression. They are just themselves. They are honest to themselves. They are honest to others. They are honest about their ability. They are honest about their limitations. They are just vulnerable. And I think vulnerability is so critical because it creates an openness. And it's that openness which is the fuel for great teams to work well together. And along with this vulnerability, what it also creates is an understanding and an ability for team members to express themselves. To express themselves when it comes to performance, express themselves in terms of opinions as well. And you see, when vulnerability and this openness to express themselves comes together, you are creating a fantastic work culture. Psychological safety. The second aspect that it creates beyond the psychological safety is team members, create the value of being dependable. Right? And all this percolates from the leader himself. Because the leader is dependable to his or her team members. What do I mean by that? If the leader says something, he or she backs up the word with the appropriate action. He stands by his word. There is credibility, and as a result, there's dependability. And when this dependability actually happens, then what really happens is it spreads from the leader to each team member. And therefore, this value of dependability becomes an inherent behavior and a behavior pattern. And as a consequence, each team member is dependable to the other team members. And the final result of this, the team itself is recognized as being a unit that can be depended on with regards to performance, with regards to delivery, with regards to keeping their word. Great leadership, psychological safety, creates the value of dependability. And finally, the impact of great leadership is to create meaning. Now, you can do a job in two ways. You can just do a job, or you can do a job well with the right attitude. And you see, and when there's a great culture, a psychological safety that's there, and the culture is drenched with psychological safety, team members find meaning in what they do. You must have heard this anecdote before. It's a true event. I think it was 1960s, NASA. America was trying to put its first man on the moon. There was a lot of attention there. The press was at NASA, and there was this eager journalist. He was interviewing people, the astronauts who were being trained, the scientists who were putting the pieces together. And then he finds at the corner there was one person who was actually mopping the floor. So this curious journalist goes to the person who's mopping the floor and says, "Hey, what are you doing?" And he expected an answer to say, a redundant answer to say, "Can't you see I am mopping the floor?" But guess what? You know what this man who's mopping the floor replied? He said, "I'm helping to put a man on the moon." How interesting is that answer? But if you dig a little deeper and understand what he's trying to say and where he's coming from, you understand that he has found meaning in his job. He may be doing just a small job of mopping, but for him, there's meaning. Because he says, "I want to keep the place clean. Because when I keep the place clean, it creates an environment where people can think and where people can execute. And this thinking, clarity of thought and precision in execution is going to help to put a man on the moon faster. So I'm not just doing an ordinary job of mopping, but I'm helping to put a man on the moon." That's meaning. That is meaning. And I want to tell you, as a leader, you and me are responsible to be giving meaning to our team members. And that happens only when there is this whole aspect and these tenets of leadership in place. I've spoken to you about psychological safety. The question arises then, it sounds like a fancy term, it sounds like an interesting jargon or a nice word I can throw around, but is it possible? I mean, how do I create psychological safety? How is it possible? Well, it's simple. But it requires sustained effort, it requires persistence, and it requires self-awareness. Here's how you can create psychological safety as a leader. I think the first aspect is to be approachable as a leader. I will say approachable is the first aspect to create psychological safety. What do I mean by being approachable? Approachable means my team members should be comfortable to tell me things that I like and speak to me things, importantly, which I may not be comfortable to hear. Unconsciously, subconsciously, we've created a culture, and I say we, most of us have created a culture where our team members know that I need to be politically right. This whole politically right has just dismantled leadership, right? We need to be politically right. And I think, approachable means it's not about it's about the elimination of being politically right, but ensuring that there is protocol and respect that's maintained. When protocol and respect is maintained, yet people should be able to speak their hearts out, to tell things as they are. I don't agree with your policy. and to tell things as they are with an attitude and with an intent to improve things the way they are. I think, I don't like your policy, I don't like this solution, but here's what I think you should be doing. This can give us better results. I think you were too harsh with me in the meeting yesterday. I didn't appreciate that. That's being approachable. And as a leader, you and me need to have the gumption, the humility to be able to accept that. And that's what I mean by being approachable. Psychological safety demands approachability. The second thing that psychological safety requires is accessibility. We live in times where we're all very busy, right? And that's the reality. And I'm not trying to water the busyness down. The reality is we are very busy, okay? We live in times where multitasking is the way of the game, is the new normal, right? And unfortunately, what I've noticed in corporate circles is that even for a team member to get time with their supervisor, I'm talking about a direct reporting situation here, to get time from their supervisor, they need to book an appointment and ensure that it matches in the calendar of their supervisor, right? It matches with the calendar of the supervisor. Thanks for this. Yeah, here we are. It matches with the calendar of the supervisor. Now, I think that's quite a sad situation to be in, right? I understand, I know people are busy, and I completely understand that. But if my direct team member needs to get an appointment to meet me, it's kind of scary, right? So leaders need to be accessible. In the absence of accessibility, what actually happens is that projects suffer, execution suffers, and most importantly, morale takes a beating. They need to be approachable, they need to be accessible. How do I create psychological safety? We got to be listening without judging. We got to be listening without judging. You know, psychology tells us that almost always, if you're not conscious, when somebody is speaking to you, you and me are formulating responses of what I need to reply to that person even before the person has finished making the point. Yeah. And we form our opinion, we jump to a conclusion. And that is to be avoided. You need to be present when the person is speaking. You need to be 100% in that moment when the person is speaking. You should not be hearing, but you should be listening. You should listen to the message that's spoken, and you should listen to the unspoken message as well. That is critical. You owe it to your person. You shortchange the person when you are judging the person before listening. The third aspect to create psychological safety is this whole aspect of empathy. Empathy for me is the heart and soul of leadership. What is empathy? Well, empathy is to put yourself in the shoes of the other person, is to think from the perspective of the other person's mind, is to see the situation through the eyes of the other person. Empathy is about being solution oriented. It's about saying, how can I help you? Empathy is not to be confused with sympathy. Sympathy is when you feel sorry for a person. Empathy is about, I understand what you're going through and it's a tough situation. How can I help you? I want to pause to give you an example in my personal life. In 2016, my daughter was one of my daughters was very ill. So ill that she was admitted for 88 days. And a couple of times the doctor wrote her off and said, be prepared for the worst. I live in Bombay, but my daughter was admitted in CMC Vellore. And I would often make the 3-day trip from Bombay to Vellore. And my boss came to me, my CEO who I reported to, came to me and he said, Rajiv, I want you to pack your bags and leave Mumbai and go stay in Vellore. Ask your team to report to me directly. And he went on to say one more thing. I've got 2 other kids. Ask your please let your children come and stay with us. We will take care of them. Now this is the CEO of a Tata company talking to me. For me, that was worth more than any appraisal percentage. For me, that was worth more than any promotion or designation change. For me, that was empathy in action. Empathy. What can you do as a leader to be empathetic? Being empathetic doesn't mean you cut slack and say, okay, I understand, do whatever you want. No. Empathy, you see, balances between task and people equally. It balances between task and people. Psychological safety is about creating a personal interest with your team member. And sometimes we're so obsessed and focused with the task, we should be, that we forget that we are dealing with people. Unfortunately, we use the term human resource, right? And we treat people as commodity, right? It's important as a leader that you take personal interest on each of your team member. What does personal interest mean? Personal interest means that you care for them. Personal interest means you skill your people. You spend time in developing your people so that they can learn how to fish rather than spoon feeding them. Personal interest means that you talk to them about their career progression and you mean it and you follow through with them. Personal interest means you even give a listening ear to if something is bothering them on their personal side. How interested are we with our team members? Personal interest. Creating psychological safety as a leader means that you live the values. You live the values. You see, often we talk, but I want to tell you, our team members are looking at our lives. Our lives convey the message more than the words that we actually speak. Right? We know this line in English, nice proverb, walk the talk. I want to add my version to it. If I cannot walk the talk, then I shouldn't be talking the talk. You see, my life embodies the values. And when my life embodies the values, my team members imbibe the values. That's how it actually works. And one last aspect in terms of creating psychological safety is by creating a culture of winning together. We're creating a culture of winning together, right? What is winning together? I want to tell you this, please understand this. Happy people produce significant results. Happy people produce significant results. Can you create a culture of celebration in your team? Unfortunately, many leaders, sorry for sounding judgmental, but many leaders take the credit but pass the blame. We need to move it and we need to turn it around. Authentic leadership is about taking the responsibility and passing the credit. A great example for me and a visual example for me is MS Dhoni. Every time he won a trophy, he would receive the trophy, but he would give it to his team and he would quickly move to the background. It's about winning together. I want to tell you about winning together. It's about not just recognizing somebody when they have achieved an objective, but it's also about recognizing people while they put their effort. It's easy to recognize somebody when they've achieved the final objective. It's easy. It's a no-brainer. But are you willing to recognize people when they're putting the effort and the results are not yet coming? I want to tell you, people need the recognition when the work is the toughest and they're giving their best. That's when they need the recognition. Create a culture of winning together. Psychological safety, approachable, accessible, listening without judging, practicing empathy, personal interest, living the values, and winning together. I want to close. And before I close, I want to just tell you this. I want to summarize. And the summary is this. When you are a leader who creates a culture of psychological safety, that's when you are actually practicing what is called as authentic leadership. Authentic leadership. And authentic leaders are leaders who refresh others, whose motive is to refresh others. And when they refresh others, they themselves are refreshed in that process. Authentic leaders are leaders who discern God-given opportunities. I call it God-given opportunities. We have other words for that. Other words could be vision. They're able to see the vision when others can't see it. They are able to have intuition about what's going to happen. They have a gut feeling of what's going to happen. I call it God-given opportunities. Not only are they able to discern the God-given opportunities, they are able to act on it. They're able to act on it. Authentic leaders, like we spoke, don't need a title. They don't need a title. Authentic leaders do what they can instead of worrying about what they can't. What can you do in a situation like that? In this, let me do what I can. What's in my control? Let me focus on what's in my control. Authentic leaders promote the cause and not themselves. When you look at history, when you look at a Nelson Mandela, when you look at a Mother Teresa, when you look at a Mahatma Gandhi, amazing leaders, great examples of authentic leadership. They never said, hey, I am Gandhi, I'm the best. He never said that. He said, we need to get independence for India. We need to end this racial discrimination in South Africa. We need to work for the destitutes and the poor on the streets of Calcutta. That was the cause. It was never about self-promotion. And authentic leaders are leaders whose lifestyle is about unshakable convictions, unflappable beliefs, and uncompromising values. Unshakable beliefs. In the face of doubt, they still believe their beliefs and they doubt their doubts. Unflappable, unshakable convictions. They stand for their convictions. They don't cow down when they are one amongst the crowd and the crowd is shouting against them. They stand for that. And finally, they have uncompromising values. In other words, great character. As I close, I want to tell you, we live in a time and age where people need great leadership. And the people who are in your circle of influence are looking to you to supply that kind of a leadership. I want to encourage you, as I encourage myself, you have it in you to be a great leader. So I want to wish you all the very best, and I want to wish you the best as you have an exciting day, great speakers coming your way, lots of learning coming your way, and all the very best, and God bless. Thank you for your time.